Hello and welcome back to Happier Ever After series. Today we're talking about post-traumatic growth after grief. And before we go any further, I want to be very clear about what this episode is and what it's not. This is not about silver linings. It is not about finding meaning too quickly. It is not about turning pain into something positive in order to make it more acceptable. And it is definitely not about suggesting that grief is somehow good for you. So if you've ever recoiled at the idea of growth after loss, if it's felt invalidating, dismissive, or like pressure to be okay, I understand why. This episode is about reclaiming what post traumatic growth actually means without toxic positivity and without raising the reality of grief. Let's start by naming the discomfort around this idea. For many people, the phrase post traumatic growth can land badly. It can sound like at least something good came out of it. You're stronger because of this. This happened for a reason. And when you've lost someone you love, especially a partner, those messages can feel cruel because no amount of growth makes the loss worth it. And no amount of meaning replaces who you lost. So I want to say this first. Growth after grief does not justify the loss. It does not redeem it, and it does not make it okay. Post traumatic growth is not about what the loss gave you, it's about what you learned to carry as you kept living. That distinction matters. Post traumatic growth, when understood properly, is not about becoming better than you were before. It's about becoming different. And different doesn't mean improved, it means changed. After loss, especially a life altering loss, you don't return to the same world. Your assumptions shift, your priorities change, your nervous system recalibrates, your understanding of life deepens. This is not growth you chose. It's growth that happened because you stayed alive in a changed world. Another important thing to say here is post traumatic growth is not something everyone experiences, and it is not something you are required to experience. If you don't resonate with this idea at all, that doesn't mean you're stuck or failing. Growth is not a goal, it's a byproduct for some people at some points under some conditions. And for others, survival itself is the achievement that matters. So, what does post traumatic growth actually mean in the context of grief? At its core, it refers to changes that occur alongside ongoing pain, not instead of it. It might show up as a deeper appreciation for what matters, greater honesty in relationships, clearer boundaries, a changed relationship with time, a stronger connection to values, a willingness to live more truthfully. But none of these erase grief, they coexist with it. This is where the idea of growing around grief becomes important. Grief doesn't disappear so that growth can happen. Growth happens around grief. Like a tree growing around a scar in its trunk, the scar remains. It's visible. It shapes the growth. But the tree still grows. This metaphor matters because it removes the pressure to move beyond loss. You don't outgrow grief. You learn how to live with it in a body and life that continue to change. Another thing that often gets misunderstood is timing. Post-traumatic growth is not an early grief phenomenon. If someone is talking about growth while you're still stuck in shock, survival, or deep pain, it can feel profoundly invalidating. That's because growth requires a degree of safety, not happiness, not resolution, but enough internal and external stability for reflection to occur. For many people, growth only becomes visible much later, often quietly and often in hindsight. You don't usually feel like you're growing while it's actually happening. You just feel like you're adjusting, making different choices, letting go of things that no longer fit, becoming less willing to tolerate what costs too much. That's not self-improvement, that's adaptation. Another reason people resist this idea is because growth language has been co-opted by toxic positivity. The insistence that pain must produce something useful, that suffering must lead to insight, that if you've been through something awful, you should emerge wiser, stronger, or more enlightened. This is deeply unhelpful because it turns growth into an obligation, and growth does not work under obligation. Real growth after grief is often subtle. It may look like being less available for nonsense, choosing rest over performance, letting go of people who can't meet you, speaking more honestly, even when it's uncomfortable, knowing what you can't survive again. These shifts are not inspirational, they're grounded, and they often come with sadness as well as clarity. Another important thing to say is this: post-traumatic growth does not mean you are grateful for the trauma. You don't have to be thankful for what broke your life open. You don't have to frame loss as a gift. You are allowed to say, this was devastating and it changed me. Both can be true. I also want to speak directly to something many people feel but don't say. Sometimes the idea of growth feels like a betrayal. Like if you've become stronger, clearer, or more grounded, you are somehow leaving your loved one behind. If that fear has shown up for you, it makes sense. But growth doesn't mean disconnection, it means integration. Your love, your grief, your memories, they don't disappear as you grow, they become part of who you are. Another misunderstanding is that growth should feel positive. Often it doesn't. Growth can feel like grief sharpening rather than softening. It can feel like disillusionment, like seeing the world more clearly and liking parts of it less. It can come with anger, sadness, and grief for who you were before. It doesn't mean something has gone wrong. It means your perspective has shifted. I also want to name that post-traumatic growth is not linear. It doesn't move steadily forward. You may feel grounded and then undone, clear and then lost, strong and then exhausted. That doesn't negate growth, it reflects the reality of living with loss. Another key point is agency. Growth is not something you force. You cannot decide to grow your way out of grief. What you can do is create conditions that support integration, gentleness, honesty, boundaries, support that respects your peace. Growth emerges when pressure reduces, and that's why it cannot be demanded. I want to say this clearly. If you are still surviving, you are not behind. If you are still in pain, you are not failing. If growth has not shown up, nothing is missing. Post traumatic growth is not a finish line. It's a description of what sometimes happens when a person continues to live truthfully after something has shattered their life. And finally, I want to bring this back to something fundamental. Growth after grief does not mean becoming someone who is over it. It means becoming someone who carries what happened with honesty, depth, and integrity. It means allowing life to expand without denying what shaped you. If, as you're listening to this, you feel resistant, relief, or confusion, pause for a moment. Notice the feelings where they are in your body. Notice the breath. Notice that you don't need to decide where you stand on this today. You are allowed to reject the idea entirely. You're allowed to resonate with parts of it. You are allowed to let it sit quietly in the background. There's no pressure here. If you'd like more support, more information to help you navigate life after loss, you can explore the Happya Ever After Hub at happiercoach.com/happier-ever-after. You don't need to grow in order for your grief to be valid. You don't need to turn pain into purpose. You're allowed to live honestly exactly as you are. Thank you for being here today with me. I'll be with you again in the next episode. Until then.